guys who have a process for everything. These really bright guys who have a process for everything really don't have a process for sales. And sales really is just like any other process. And it's this lather, rinse, repeat process where we perform the process, we identify how we did, whether we did well or not, we add some remediation steps, and we do it again. And we do that for so many other things. I go back to imaging workstations at my MSP, and we had a process. We rolled out a Windows 7 image at the time. We installed a lab tech agent along with it. And then we went, oh, we can do better. Everybody needs Adobe Reader. So we rolled it out and we added Adobe Reader. And then we did imaging at client locations, and we'd auto join the domain and take a couple other steps. And we continued to iterate that process for 15 years. And yet sales is a process that we don't even have most places. So I want to spend some time today talking about, what this system really is and what it does. And Marnie came up with a great quote kind of on accident the other day that really fit this webinar. So we stole it and used it, which is every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. And to me, that says if you're failing at sales, it's because you have a system that's set up to fail you at sales, right? And the opportunity is always to turn around and look inward and see what can I do better or different. That was always the question I would ask to kind of improve that. But what do you take from this, from that quote? Do you land in the same place I do?
Absolutely. I think we're all in this webinars because we love the process from one angle or another. From my vantage point, I think about sales and helping my MSPs with that. And I want to be able to control the outcomes as much as I can. So I'm obsessed with every component that I can control. So yeah, and you fail the plan, yeah, definitely planning to fail. So
right. There's another great quote.
There. That's it.
And you mentioned controlling the outcome. I love that, and I think we'll probably circle back to that as we get to some of the other slides. But that probably is a theme we need to touch on a couple of times as we walk through and talk through this. So let's talk about the kind of 5 steps that you outlined for me when we started kind of putting this together and building this. Goal setting was a big one, and to be honest, it's probably one I didn't do well enough at my MSP. I had a pretty good sales process. When we got a lead, we landed 65, 70% of them. We were good at closing. We were good at all that process, but we didn't really do a lot of goal setting. So as a guy who thought he was a good sales guy, talk to me about goal setting, because I've obviously missed the mark here. No pun intended with the arrow.
Absolutely. So, when I think about goals and starting an outbound sales program, it's evolved, right? I've been doing this for about 3 years now with Simple Selling, and we're not quite at the 10 MSP mark in terms of the clients that I work with. So just to give you a sense of where we are and how long we've been working on this. But yeah, when it comes to goal setting, all these things bulleted here are certainly sort of the obvious things, is your offering solid? Are your existing clients happy? How much are you ready to spend on outbound and on sales? Sort of the things that you would kind of expect in any kind of business plan. But I have here is kind of just some notes on some of the things that I've heard from MSP presidents who are kind of new to outbound, new to sales. And I kind of just wanted to put them out there and just talk about them a little bit, because this is a pivotal moment in the process, starting and thinking about what your expectations or goals should be. So I just have 3 kind of little notes here on goals. So I'll just dive into one, Alex, and then, feel free to just, anytime, really. If anyone in the chat has a question, I would love to make this more conversational. So one thing that comes up a lot when I start talking to an MSP president, I'm thinking about sales is, and I asked them, what is your close rate been, or what is your expectation? And many times it is my close rate will be 20%. And what I hear, I think what's really important to take away, guys, is if you're starting with outbound, there's a lot of different things that are happening. So when you're thinking about goals for outbound leads, you got to remember that your 20% is often coming from what you heard from another MSP and a peer group potentially. And many times those are from referrals. So what you're really attributing the 20% number to is what I typically close with a referral. And a referral, we all know, is someone who already has baked in trust because they've been referred to us, They typically have a very big pain at that moment. And so that's the number. And if you're hearing it, it's a good benchmark, but that's not really something that you can immediately put on your business plan for like, what is a good goal? And in my experience, like with the MSPs that we're working with, right, and we're generating like outbound opportunities, like that are sourced from outbound, where we're interrupting someone. You know, the close rate on the high end is like just under 20%. I have it like 19. Oh, sorry, no, sorry, 16.7% for my top closing MSP. And on the worst, you know, it's 2%. But at the same time, there are lots of deals, potential deals that are in between, you know, proposal stage and final decision. The sales cycles are long. So, but anyway, yeah, I need thoughts on that, Alex.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that because, you know, we always knew that our close rate at my MSP was super high, but it was because we presented 1 to 2 quotes a month. And in doing so, we were doing almost all of that business. I would say 2/3 of that business off of referrals, because we were a huge QBR shop. We ended every QBR shop or every QBR with, did we deliver value to you? And when they said yes, because we really had our QBR dialed in, the immediate next question was, well, I really appreciate that. And I hate to even ask, but who do you know who could, you know, really see some benefit from the same kind of value I delivered to you today? And we got a ton of referrals from that, right? I always tell a story about the girl who walked me down the hall in a medical plaza and knocked on 3 doors and stood outside while I talked to her counterparts at 3 different doctor's offices in the same plaza. And I ended up doing business with 2 of them, right? Wow. Those are easy deals to close. And those let you have a 60 or 70% close rate. At the same point, we knew we didn't want to have a 100% close rate, because then we were too cheap. We were giving things away. We were there's a problem there too. So, you know, 16.7% on the you know, on these cold leads, on these outbound leads, really doesn't sound too terrible to me. But you know, it really is a difference when your MSP goes from doing, and the average MSP we talk to does about 6 presentations a year. So 6, less than 1 a month, seems to be about the average. To doing, how many of your folks doing that are closing at 16%? How many leads are they getting a month?
So we're averaging anywhere between like 6 to 8 opportunities, or like first time appointments a month.
So they're still closing average. 1 a month.
Yeah, and you know,
from this,
lower months. Yeah, lower months. It's an average, right? I mean, summer was we're not our best months because people were out and actually vacationing for the.
I don't want to take sales calls. It was nice outside.
But yeah.
Well, focusing in on KPIs, you know, and we've been talking about a lot of stats and a lot of percentages. What are some important KPIs that you should be tracking when you're starting to set up this sales process?
That's a great question. So, you know, coming back to my initial conversations with presidents who are thinking about this, usually they come to me with, you know, we want 6 meetings a month. Can you guarantee it? You know, that's sort of the spirit of their question, their desire. I totally understand. I mean, that's why we're talking to me. You want opportunities,
right?
But what's really important, and I think I put it back to sort of because we're talking to folks who are thinking of launching your own outbound sales program, right? So when you think of a New Year's resolution for yourself as personally, right? We usually set a goal, like I'm going to lose X amount of weight, or I'm going to run a marathon, right? And what usually happens is most people just don't hit it. And I think what's happening, the reason I bring that up is because we're very focused on the outcomes, right? When in reality, what's really going to help us is to focus on the process. So if you're a person who wants to run marathon at the end of the year, think of what we should ask ourselves, like, what kind of person do I need to be, or what kind of person runs marathons? What is the identity of that person? James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, like I'm kind of stealing some of his quotes from this, but you know, what he says, that kind of person is someone who probably runs every day. And so focusing more on the process, focusing more on doing those things, what you need to do to get the outcomes, that is sort of step 1. We do need to have KPIs. So you can have KPIs towards the process, and the outcomes you'll get an outcome. You may not like the outcome at first, but then you have something to go back on and fix, which goes back to your very first point, Alex.
Well,
So,
we learned this a little bit when we launched Lifecycle Insights, was that marketing is a process, right? And it's one of those trust the system processes, because you don't see any results immediately. And when we went and did our big marketing push and we launched the company, you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait, and 7 or 8 months in, you start to see this impact where
wow.
people start to click, people start to talk, people start to reach out to you, and it really, you hate the answer of trust the process, but it really does work. Some of the KPIs that I've seen successful sales leaders track include just things like the number of outbound dials, right?
Oh yeah.
I can't control the number of meetings nearly as well as I can control the number of dials. If I can make my sales guy do 15 dials a day, on top of the other things that he's doing, or if I have a person who's just an appointment setter, they can do obviously a whole lot more dials a day. But those KPIs should be, in my mind, those actions that we really can touch on and enforce, and the things that we can actually manage, right? If we work on the things that we can manage, the things that we can't manage will seem to solve for themselves.
Right.
Um, One of the things I hear from MSPs who are getting started with a sales process is, I can afford a sales guy. Can I just hire him and turn him loose and let him go? And that always takes me back to setting a sales guy up for success, right? How do we if you're going to hire a closer, how do you get them the appointments? Who manages that person? You put roles and responsibilities on this punch list, and that one was interesting to me because I always think about the MSPs in Slack and in Facebook and on Reddit, who go, I want to hire a sales guy, got to grow the business. I've saved 100 grand so I can hire this guy. He tells me he's a closer, blah, blah, blah. I can just hire him, right? And this will work. What roles and responsibilities do you see broken out here? And how is it different if you're doing it in-house or if you're outsourcing some of it?
Yeah. So thanks. So this again is similar to what I've heard. If they've sold before, they can sell here, sort of thing. It's sort of one of those assumptions, I think, that some of us new into outbound think. And you have to ask yourself, is this person that I'm interviewing for the SDR, sales development rep, the one who's going to be creating these new opportunities for me, is this person someone who has actually done SDRing before? Look at their resume closely. We all embellish and exaggerate our CVs a little bit, but really you want to make sure, were they an account executive before, or were they an SDR before? So that's very, very important, because we're talking about a person who's going to need a lot of grit. So when you're interviewing these folks, or looking for, and obviously I'm talking about assuming the internal route, but it could also be you're having the same questions with an outsourced partner, like describing the SDR who's going to be representing you. Is this person someone who has grit? Tell me about a time when you were behind in quota. What did you do? And you kind of want to see the person, see how they respond. What was their, those are really important, and try to simulate the real environment during the interviewing process as much as you can. I've made a lot of mistakes in hiring, which has cost me clients in these early, the first few years. Like I said, I'm in year 3 now. I'm sure I will. It's not a perfect thing. We've all made mistakes with hiring, but especially with sales, you want to make sure that you're getting a true SDR.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily need managed IT or even IT background. You can teach them that, right? If they're sitting, the QBRs and all the stuff that Alex and his software provides, like getting the SDR exposure to the impact you're having on clients, and all the other training, just the general background of like the pain points, all that can be trained. So
take one step back. You're using some terms that I'm not sure everybody here is familiar with, or can really draw the line in the sand between. So an SDR, this is sales development rep. This is a cold caller, right?
Yeah, cold caller.
Yep. And this is not the person who's going to go on site and close the deal. This is what we called in the traditional sales process an appointment setter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that person enables another position. What's that next role in the food chain that an MSP has to have if they're going to build all this internal? Because we're going to have a couple of different roles that we account for. We've got the SDR.
Yes.
They enable.
Correct. So, and in my world, we simple selling, we are the SDR. Right. So our job is to find the potential prospects, create the whole process to get that first appointment between the MSP and of course these SMBs that are in their territory, right?
Yep.
So for us, the account executive, if we're looking at the typical sales, like these job titles, the AE, account executive, for us is the MSP president typically. But within your organization, it would probably be that you, the president, if you're watching this, it would probably be your role. But so you guys would do the assessments and take the baton sort of from there.
Yeah. And we work with MSPs that are all over the spectrum. Some of them still have the owner doing it. I think the owner can tackle this role upwards of $1 million in revenue. When you get to $2, $3, $4 million in revenue, this gets harder for the owner to do, especially if they're an operationally focused owner. And you talked a little bit about personalities and how this kind of stuff goes and what you can expect out of the people. Process is hard for real salespeople. And real salespeople want the instant gratification of a win. And they used to tell everybody at my MSP, they always used to tell me that I was the seagull salesman, right? I would go out and close the deal. I would come back with the paperwork and I would poop all over everybody's desk with my paperwork. And then I'd fly back out the door to go do the next one. And that was just my personality. And so there's also some oversight that needs to happen when you've got this true closer, an account executive or whatever. As you grow, you're going to need a layer of management in there to take care of this person, to set expectations, to give them quotas, to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. There's going to be some sales management, which quite often as you branch out, at least from what I've seen, when the owner steps out of sales and someone else steps in it, the owner still has to remain as sales manager to kind of cover and make sure that everything's being done right.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, just a couple more things that I found, because as I was preparing for this, I was like, I got to bring in some statistics that are outside of my world. I looked at the Bridge Group. They're like a sales consulting company, and they did this huge study, 56-pager. I can share it with anyone afterwards who wants it. It's great material, great research. But they said that the average tenure for an SDR, the cold caller, is like 1.8 years.
Wow.
So think about that for a moment. That says a couple of things. It says that, first of all, it's a tough job, right?
I hear burnout when I hear that.
Burnout. We hear people that sometimes they'll be rude and they'll hang up. So it's emotionally draining. That could be part of it. There's promotion opportunity, though. That also means that these people are moving to AE or other roles within the organization sometimes. It also means that they're younger. All the SDRs on my team are younger than me. I'm 38. So it's a certain profile. Doesn't mean all SDRs are in that range, but by and large. So to your point, Alex, like there's a very big role for a coach or a manager, for someone who's green in IT, managed service sales.
And at one point, we actually outsourced the coaching role at my MSP. We hired a Sandler sales coach to do some coaching and some training. So if we move from that first slide, let's talk about the outbounding piece of this. Outbounding is a term I hadn't even heard before. So I feel like it's kind of unique in your space, right? But talk through these activities and what this really looks like, because I think this is the stuff that I won't say no MSPs, 2 or 3% of MSPs are doing today. Would you say you're finding people who are already doing these things when they come to you as a client and they're not doing them well, or they just don't even know where to start to do these kind of things?
Yeah, the majority of ones I talk to are not doing them. Some of them, I'd say maybe half have tried in the past internally or with another partner. So it is kind of a 30% never, 30%, or the other respective areas on that. So
right.
Yeah.
So talk through lead sourcing. What does that really look like? Because I think that's somewhere where MSPs really struggle.
Yeah. So I have a couple of points. I mean, on lead sourcing specifically, this is a huge thing because, I kind of think of it as like a crew race. I used to row in college. I wasn't like a great rower, but it was a tremendous sport. And, at the beginning of the race, you're starting off from a dead stop. All the boats are lined up and you need to build up a lot of momentum to get all 8 guys in the coxswain moving. And there's 2,000 meters typically. So the first couple of strokes are shorter frequency and really hard. And then you get into a steady state. And I think of like lead sourcing in a similar vein where, you're going to have some kind of a quota or some goals set out, KPIs for your SDR. So they need to have a lot of leads, some companies and contacts at the beginning of the period that you're going to evaluate them at, so that they have the ability to get to the outcomes that you're desiring, that you're both desiring.
They need phone numbers to dial, right?
They need enough phone numbers to dial. They need the right phone numbers to dial. There needs to be a very clear expectation what your target market is. And that stuff needs to be in the CRM, and it needs to be as clean and accurate as possible. It needs to be as organized there.
So where do MSPs go to find leads today? Where's the most successful place? We can all buy a lead list with mixed results, those kind of things. Is that the best method, or are there some tricks to the trade that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, so I mean, we do all of our sourcing from Navigator, Sales Navigator, the premium version of LinkedIn. Okay. So we spend, once we understand like our clients are the MSPs, their target market, the number at the head count, and it's roughly all the same. Somewhere between 20 to 40 is the ideal managed services head count for our typical clients anyway. And they want to be within an hour drive or so max. And, the other, many of them don't care as much about vertical, but more about, is that prospect growing or not? Is there an evolution? Are they in an industry that's moving? And does that company have?
And I think a lot of MSPs have given up on LinkedIn. So there's obviously something that we don't know as an industry in how to work LinkedIn and make it successul. So maybe that's one of the things that you learn in outsourcing some of this. Yeah,
do not give up on LinkedIn. Do not give up.
Awesome.
The big problem opportunity. LinkedIn doesn't get us the full email, like the email address of the folks that we find. So there are some paid tools that you can find. I mean, I'm not going to promote any particular one, but they're paid email tools, so you can go from what you find in Navigator to getting as accurate as possible contact information, and then you got to get that into your CRM, and you got to figure out. Remember back to the previous point with the SDR. Is the SDR going to roles and responsibilities? Is the SDR going to do this, or someone else?
Yeah. In your opinion, is that a valuable use of the SDR's time?
Yes, but certain components of it. Yeah, there's a few steps, and so and the reason is, I want my SDRs to feel that they have a say in their pipeline, because I don't want them to point the finger that they didn't get exactly leads that they want,
because they got all bad leads. I couldn't close anything.
So
awesome.
That's how I would see it.
And so SDR activities include a little bit of lead sourcing, a little bit of figuring out who the leads are. A big chunk of it is contacting those leads. Training and coaching, I assume, goes into scripting, how to handle people, the psychology of scheduling an appointment, all that happy stuff.
So the big thing that I've heard again with presidents that are new to this is like, especially if you're thinking of doing it in-house, is that, it's only going to take like an hour or two of my time to manage this new SDR. So that goes with the training and coaching component, right? Remember all the things we mentioned. They're new, they're green, they're younger, they're ambitious, right? The best SDRs ask a lot of questions. They want to absorb your knowledge, so they're going to ask more of your time.
Right.
And on top of that, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. And so you're going to need to, if you assumed 1 or 2 hours, it's like the construction projects to the remodeling, it always like double or triple
I was just going to say a network engineering project, because when my engineer told me I could get it done in 8 hours, I would go 16 hours, build to the client, done.
Yeah. So just anticipate that.
His quote.
Build that in.
And absolutely.
And just one more thing on activities, because I think this is important. The SDR activities, right? So a lot of folks say, you need 100 dials a day, and 100 dials a day. That's what I'm told is what it takes to get there. We got to dial a lot.
12 calls an hour. It's a call every 5 minutes all day.
No, definitely do not do that. I just want to say, like, when COVID hit, I hate bringing it up, but everyone went. A lot of people went home. The phones from work were not brought home. People went harder on LinkedIn, on social media. They went harder on their email. They went to Teams and Slack. And so, everyone is multi-channel. We're in different places. So you got to anticipate how you evaluate your process for your SDR and the activities he or she should do. It needs to be multi-channel. It has to be multi-channel. Yeah. The decision makers are not just phone people. They're not just from, legacy way of buying. They're using multiple channels. So make sure that your process has phone, email, and I would recommend LinkedIn as a part of that.
Are those the 3 primary channels that you have the most success in?
That's what we use. Yeah, so I could only have success.
Those are great nuggets today. I mean, those are things that MSPs can walk away with, and I guarantee you, a significant number of MSPs are not doing those things, especially on the LinkedIn side. So as we move out of the outbounding piece and into nurturing, right? So I've got a lead. Maybe I've contacted them. They said the timing isn't right, or maybe they didn't respond at all. What do we do with that person over time, right? That's what this next portion really starts to look like.
Yeah. Yeah, this is super important because majority of those, companies that SDR calls are not going to have that big pain in the moment. And you need to have some marketing plan, because if not, what's going to happen? They say, all right, thanks. And that's it. And the next SDR from the MSP down the street will call. And then all that effort, all that investment in that month that SDR did goes to nothing.
If you're not there when the pain
having
happens.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's the majority of where leads end up in marketing. So don't underestimate marketing. And I'd say with content creation, what we're trying to understand is like, what is the big differentiator for you guys? And it's the stuff that Alex and Marnie and like your software is enabling you guys to do. That's the part of the process around differentiation, right? Because it's not just about IT support anymore. Like, if it was just about that, we would have gotten the appointment if they were getting slow IT support. So you got to have a way to curate the success stories and to get that content out there.
So this slide actually makes me think of two amazing books. So if nobody takes anything home from this, from the dumb sales guy over here, other than this, Blue Ocean Strategy, one of the best books ever to separate yourself from the herd. And then around the content creation, They Ask You Answer, I think is just a fantastic.
Oh, Mark Sheridan.
Yeah. So both of those books are fantastic, but content creation is hard for MSPs, right? We have a room full of, and I don't want to offend any MSPs here, but I have a room full of really nerdy guys who don't like to talk to people, who don't want to write things they want to write technical things. They want to answer technical questions. They want to do cool, shiny, they want to play with cool, shiny things. How do you get MSPs to generate content that matters, that helps them show that they're different? Because it's one thing to figure out your Blue Ocean strategy. It's another to feed the content machine, because that thing's hungry, right?
This is the hardest part for us. I have to totally this is the hardest part, because we do not want to, we don't want to just like talk about tech tips or IT, right? In our content. And at the same time, we want to like really represent our MSPs individually. And we don't want to take up your time because of you guys are doing so many things. And so this is hard. I just want to say, like, anything I'm saying is like, it's not like it's easy. This is super hard. But I think where we like to start is like, we want to make sure, first and foremost, that like we are part of the VCIO process. So we are being invited to like QBR meetings. We look at ourselves as journalists for our MSPs, where we're observing what you do every day, and then following up with questions. And then that is a source of our content. Like, that is the inspiration for our content, a big part of it. So don't feel like you need to write the content. Keep doing what you're doing, but don't block the salesperson or the marketing person off from what you do. You need to bring them in and have that worked into your process. And you're going to need to find a writer, and then take what was learned and pass it off to a writer, and work a process in to get it published onto your website, and then use the marketing tool to create the marketing email with the link from that blog. And, it's a process. It's not, but it's a lot of work. This is a lot of work. This part of it's a lot. For sure.
Well, and that's yet another role and responsibility, right? Now we have
it's a totally different role. Yes,
which is a difficult one. And then you have content delivery, right? And we all have marketing manager in ConnectWise or something else in one of your tools. They're not the best tools. What do you recommend for MSPs for how to get this content out there, right? We can have a company Facebook page. We can have a company LinkedIn page. Nobody's going to follow your company on Twitter. Nobody cares what you. How do you get this content in front of the people that matter, so that when something breaks and now there's a moment of opportunity, you're front and center and not the next guy up the street?
Yeah, so that's thanks for asking. So one of the biggest fears for my SDRs, like the cold callers, is that they planted so many seeds. They got these people who said, no thanks to the appointment, but I'd love to hear about you, right? Yeah. One of their fears is that these seeds will not bear fruit. And so we have systems that ease the mind of the SDR. So first of all, we have marketing going on, period. And second, we have a system that's going to let the SDR know when that lead is revisiting the website.
Yep.
So you want to have, to answer your question, like for content delivery for marketing, you want to have a 360 degree system that kind of connects the sales, all the stuff that the sales guys are doing, and what the marketing is doing, like the blogs published, the marketing emails, the newsletters sent, like tracking all that, and enabling notifications back to the SDR, and all the whole activity from when the SDR prospected on Navigator all the way to when that lead, that fruit finally bore, like when that seed finally bore fruit. You want all that history in one place. So the tech that's at the heart of what we do is HubSpot. Okay. HubSpot has like the sales stuff that the SDR is doing, but it also has like just like the basic marketing components. But the fact that these two are in sync in one place, it's super powerful.
And so your SDR can see, I contacted this person in January. They opened 17 emails from us between now and January, and they took a sales meeting, and it's scheduled for 2 days from now.
Exactly.
So they can just having that fruits of their labor.
Exactly. I mean, and there have been times like some of my MSPs, like they've closed a deal, and then they're like, "Oh, there's no commission for this one," and I'm like, "Thank goodness I have HubSpot." And I go into HubSpot, and sure enough, Alan had reached out to this company in the back, and I can see all of his work, and I can see. Right. So, how do you attribute a closed deal to the right person? Well, you need to have the good system to enable to track it.
Yeah. And MSP tools notoriously terrible at this. So smart guys in the room are watching this and are looking for something to build a sales tool that actually fits the MSP space well. Still does not exist in my mind, and that's why Derek's out here using HubSpot to get it done.
And there are others, like there's so many tools. Like I'm just biased towards HubSpot because I used to work there before.
Well, so I'm anti any tool that doesn't talk to my PSA and the core of the rest of what I do. Right, the whole thing the whole reason we built Lifecycle Insights is because I felt like I had all this data trapped inside of my PSA, and I couldn't get it out and use it to my benefit. And for to have all that data and not be able to smoothly transition from the first SDR reach out into a contract and an ongoing customer, to me, there's value in all that data in between. And, there's an opportunity there for somebody smart to swoop in and get that one right.
Makes sense.
So let's talk about closing, because this is one of my favorite topics, hands down, probably my favorite sales topic. I noticed that you put pain, budget, and decision as kind of your talking points for closing. Those are some of my favorites. They come straight from the Sandler closing methodology. You can't close unless I know pain, budget, decision-making process. The one that's missing from here is overcoming objections, which is great because I hate overcoming objections, because in my mind, if you're overcoming objections, it's because you screwed up your sales process in the first place. And people get all bent when I tell them that. But let's talk about each one of these, because we've already mentioned that a customer's not going to work with you on the first call every time, right? There's going to need to be an event that causes them to question what they're doing with technology today, and to go re-engage with you a month down the road, 6 months down the road, whatever. That's probably the pain, right? Something doesn't work the way that it should. So they have pain, they re-engage with us. What does the rest of this process really look like? Yeah.
So, I was thinking, Alex, you were going to lead this part, because as you know,
I am happy to lead this part.
this is where the line on my service kind of draws.
Yeah. Okay.
But I even did a whole series on closing, because I wanted to I interviewed Alex and others. Yeah. What I could share, the little that I learned from speaking to folks like you, is that you guys as MSPs, you want to come across as different, and there's other MSPs that are competing right there, whether or not we want to admit it or not. So really, really important that you guys are having a good initial discussion around their business objectives, and let's try not to sound, not only ask about the IT pain, but what are the actual goals for your organization? And because there's a big disconnect, as you guys know, between C-level management and their objectives, and like what IT might have been doing for them in the past. And the more you can focus in on that, I think that's what I took away from interviewing the pros
Yeah, no,
on
no.
closing.
And the guy that bought my MSP. So I sold my MSP a little over a year ago, almost a year ago. I don't know. I've slept since then. I forget, but it's been yeah, about a year. Um, he used to say, "Don't sell the widget, right? Sell the business problem that it solves." And MSPs get so excited about EDR and XDR and MDR and gigabytes and petaflops and flux capacitors that we want to talk about all this cool stuff. And we did a bit at a stand-up event or at an on-stage event, a live event a couple weeks back, where we literally played Charlie Brown's teacher going wah 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 right? Because that's what you sound like when you start getting into all these technical things with an accountant or with just a construction company or whatever your core vertical is, with your dentist or your doctors or whoever it is that you focus on. So we need to bring it down to English. We need to keep it in the language that they understand. We need to solve for business problems. We need to get their budget. And this was always the one where so many people would go, I can't just go up to a customer and go, Derek, what's your budget for IT? Because you're going to tell me $2.
Yeah.
Or you're going to tell me, I can't tell you that because then your quote will be exactly what my budget is. And then, I'm too protective that I can't tell you that. And, I hired a Sandler trainer to help one of my account representatives get over this at one point. And what he learned was what they call a bracketing technique, which is one of my favorite techniques ever. And it's, you go in and you do your discovery, you go in and learn about the customer, you figure out what their pain is, and you sit down with the customer and say, look, I've worked with a lot of small businesses. And in my experience, it costs somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 a month to clean up problems like what you have here and to make this pain go away. And we revisit the pain and we talk about the things that hurt and we talk about the things that were the reason that they brought me here in the first place. And then you get their commitment before you ever present that, Mr. Customer, if I come back here with a solution that's between $2,000 and $3,000 a month that solves for these problems that you have, can we do business together? Or are you going to throw me out of my ear because I'm too expensive? And it's amazing how quickly with that one question, you can get a customer to tell you, yes, that's within my budget. Where if you went to them and said, what's your budget? They're going to go, I'm not telling you that. Or they're going to way lowball you. And it's about the phrasing. It's about the way that you shape it. It's about the delivery of, I can solve your problems, but it costs money. Could you afford this much money, or would I be wasting your time to even come back and meet with you? And I'm, kind of a clown. So I would go to customers and say, can we no longer be friends if I come back with a number this big? And, I could joke with it and that, but you got to find a way to say that sounds natural coming out of your mouth. If you don't joke, if you don't like to joke with people, if you're straight business, if you're by the numbers in there in your suit, like, your conversation needs to be a little different, but you need to achieve that same result of getting the customer to say, if for this many dollars, yes, you can solve my pain, we can do business together. And then you just need to know the decision-making process, which is, I'm sure there are people in your organization whose opinions you really trust, who you're going to want to talk to about this important decision. Would it make sense, or would we be able to get all those people in the same room so that none of this fancy nerd words that I'm going to be throwing around gets lost in translation, and I can answer all their questions right there and directly, right? And sometimes it's a board of directors. I've stood in front of town councils at town council meetings and given these pitches, where other folks would have let it fall because they didn't want to stand in front of that many people. But if you have to know this, you have to know the decision-making process to know how to win that one. And if your decision-making process is a bid process, my God, you better know that one too, because there's a whole other process for that one. In fact, earlier today, I did a demo for somebody who said, they're looking at us and 2 other platforms. There will be 3 platforms involved in the process, and we're the first one. And I went, sweet, because I always like to go first or last. I never want to be in the middle. And I always tell everybody that. And this guy told me he was going to see 3 more over the next week. And I said, great. I don't do high pressure sales. I would like to reach out to you one time before you make your decision. Can I email you in 7 days and just make sure you don't have any additional questions for me? I laid a few landmines, a few things that I think that our competitors will trip over, and sit back and wait. And then we reach back out to him and touch base and see if anybody fell into my traps. And so, there are some tricks and some tips to this kind of thing, but closing is an art. And as much as the rest of this is process, closing is that thing that, in my mind, when you walk away from it, and our Sandler trainers used to say, when you walk away from your close, call me. If you can't get me on the phone, send me an email and remind me of everything that happened in that call, how you felt about it, whether it went well or not, because that's the thing we need to dissect. That's the thing we need to pick apart and go, were you able to close that deal? No, I wasn't able to close that deal. Well, what went wrong? And if it's the customer had a price objection, well, guess what? I screwed up way far back 2 meetings ago because I should have had that already. If all the decision makers weren't in the room, I screwed up. I should have had that already. If they just shook their head and went, this isn't for me, there's something else in there. I didn't connect with them somehow. There's something else. And this is the call that really needs to be dissected. And it's a problem for MSP owners who are the boss, right? I'm the boss. Who do I call to help dissect my sales call? And I don't know if you do that with your partners. I think there's a ton of value there. But otherwise, I would recommend that if you're an MSP owner and you're the sole sales guy, get with a buddy in your peer group, get with a buddy across town, across the country, across the world, send me an email. And let's talk about what your closing looks like, right? Because that is the one skill that you can that can really turn the needle. There's nothing more frustrating for guys like Derek, I'm sure, than closing.
That's how we met, I think.
It is. And there's nothing more frustrating for you with working with your partners to go, I landed 20 appointments for this guy and he couldn't close on one of them.
Yeah, Amoeba's doing really well. I mean, and it was I attribute a lot of it because they figured out what they connected with you. Yeah, guys, be with Alex. Sorry, Alex, your account.
So outside of to put perspective to those who aren't sure what conversation's going on here, Derek had a partner who was struggling to close their deals, and we sat and talked for 45 minutes or so. And it was the pandemic; life was weird, things were different, and they kind of let that a little bit of head trash build up in their head around the pandemic. And when we talked through it, they were able to identify that head trash and sweep it aside and go back to closing deals. And they were able to close deals before the pandemic, and it just really got in their heads. But 90% of what keeps MSPs from closing deals is head trash. The other 10% is being too technical. There is a lot of head trash that goes into this closing component. So it is one of my favorites. And again, if you find yourself repeatedly getting objections, you broke down way too early in your sales process. In my mind, your sales process is no less than 3, but in my world, it was 5 interactions with my customer. So there was a right fit call. Derek hands over a lead to me. I would pick up the phone and go, hey, just wanted to touch base with you, learn a little bit about your environment. Hopefully the SDRs collected a lot of that information for me.
Oh yeah, that's very important. I mean, we make sure that the call is all the calls SDR does are recorded, and of course the emails and all that stuff is there. So we have a little note. We make sure that the agenda is the MSP. You should know what you're going into in that first appointment.
I never had an SDR, but I would always have that first call. It was just, hey, are you a good fit for us, right? I was going to the customer going, do I really want your business anyway?
I love that.
And I would have that conversation, but at the end of that call, I would know the size of the organization, what some of their pains were, and that it was worth it to me to invest more time. And then I would go out and meet with them. I'd have what I call a fact finding event, just a pain finding event. We would just do a discovery. This was a verbal discovery. I'd talk to as many people in the building as I can, learn as much as I can, and then I would schedule for an engineer to come back and run a scanning tool on the network. Never did that myself because I wanted 2 sets of eyes on the place. I wanted an excuse to walk away and collect my thoughts and come back and not get pressed with anything. The engineer would go on site. There was no expectation that he was going to give him a quote. So that was good. Myself and the engineer would compare quotes. That was 3 touches. I would call the customer back and say, just to summarize what I learned after talking to my engineer, this is about what we know. Mm-hmm. I would firm up my price. So I'd get them in that budget. I'd use that bracketing technique to, I've seen this before. It costs between this and this to fix this problem. If I come back in there, are we still in the right place? Give them one last chance to abort, remind them of their pain a little bit, make sure I have all the decision makers in the room, and set that last appointment. And then I would go on site and deliver. And my sales guy would lose his mind. My account manager that would go with me would lose his mind when I would sit in the room and go, so here's your deal. Here's how we fix everything. We'd review their pain. Mr. Customer, does it sound like I've solved for everything you talked about here? Well, yes, it does. Well, we're within the budget that we talked about. You remember you told me that if we were under this much money, we can do business together. Yeah, I remember that conversation. Okay, great. Do you want Ross and I to go stand in the hallway while you guys talk about us behind our back, or do you want to sign the paperwork now? And his head would blow up. He'd go, you can't say that to people. And I can't tell you, people would reach across the table, grab the contract, sign it, and send it back. I had a school of 7 people in the room, a small Catholic school, and it was a big contract for us. And 7 people kind of looked at each other around the room when I said that, and there were a few head nods, and the principal went, we're in, we'll sign it, done. And never once did anybody ask me to stand outside in the hallway, but they will ask you to, they will correct you and go, I think we need to talk about this overnight, or but that's great.
Confidence goes a long way.
Yeah. And at some point you're forcing your customer to say no, right? Get your no and get out, or get them to say, we can't make this decision today. We got to take it to the board. Well, I didn't think the board was, we already talked about your decision making. Do I need to go talk to the board with you? But it bubbles up those other things and gets any objections you have so that you can kill them and get rid of them. But if you're still getting them at that point, it's because you missed the board early, you missed the whatever the decision-making factor was, or whatever it was. So that's me on my soapbox talking about closing, because I absolutely love it. If any of you have questions about closing deals, happy to have that conversation with you. And then the last piece is reflecting, right? This is how we come all the way back around and we figure out what we did well and what could we do better or different, right? So talk to me about this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is pivotal. I mean, you gotta be able to
everything.
Question everything.
I love that.
I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, that those two words kind of say it, but you need to have that period of time with your SDR or the marketing team to sit back and look backwards and say, evaluate all the things that you said that the SDR was going to do activity-wise. Did you achieve those things? If not, why not? Evaluate it. Marketing as well. Did we get the stories that we wanted? Evaluate that, and then look at the results, and then rinse and repeat, and make the tweaks where you think will have the biggest impact, and go from there. Where you're going to be working on your own equation, like your predictable revenue, your predictable MRR. It's only possible if you do this last step to reflect, because otherwise you're just kind of like the next batch of a couple hundred companies. Let's go get them, and if you're not really tweaking the process, you can't control as much what's coming out at the end. So.
Well, and if you have a bad process, you'll continue to put leads through the meat grinder and come out with bad sausage, right?
Yeah. You need to talk about that. There needs to be a meeting. I guess the thing is, like, there needs to be a meeting. There needs to be some expected reports. There needs to be a discussion about the opportunities that didn't, the FTAs, first time appointments that did not close, the pipeline from the month, the outcomes, marketing as well, and the components in between there. And
I would argue it's just as important to review the ones that did close, right?
Oh, even more so. Yeah.
We have a statement that we teach when we're teaching people how to do quarterly business reviews. We always say, and I stole this from something that Jim Collins wrote about New Year's resolutions in 2003. And if you've ever read a Jim Collins book, brilliant dude. Good to Great is one of his best books. But Jim Collins said that your stop doing list should be longer than your start doing list. That's just to say that most of us along the way develop bad habits. And it's easier to just stop doing something that's a bad habit than it is to force yourself. It's easier to stop drinking that soda at lunch every day than it is to force yourself to get on a treadmill for 30 minutes, right? So that stop doing list in the sales process, there's probably a lot of places where we cut a corner. Maybe we said something we shouldn't have. Maybe we got too friendly with a prospect and just assumed the deal was ours to lose. There's so many things you could do that trip you up and have a negative impact on you along the way, that I think even with your wins, you need to look at them and go, was there a close call there? Was there something that we could have done a little different to help us figure out a stumbling block earlier? Did we get all the way to the end and then get an objection, and what could we have done early on to nerf that objection? And I think that's the only way to really dissect your process, and to even take apart your wins and say, and again, what do we keep doing? What worked in our win that got us across the finish line? Everybody says to me, like, you're born with a gift of sales, and they don't realize that after 20 years of hard work, all of a sudden I was born with the gift of sales. It's one of those things that it's the overnight success that was built, in 20 years at a time. So and I think that's where everybody I think it's something folks take for granted, is that you have to dissect the wins as well as the losses, because none of them are, no sales experience is perfect. You never get it all right. So What can we do better or different? What can we continue to improve as we go?
Yeah. And I just want to add as well, something that I'm not sure where in this presentation, but one of the big things that I've learned in the last couple of years doing this is that you have to celebrate your wins. So from my perspective as the partner for MSPs, I have to celebrate my wins. And that means, like, we may not have gotten, say on any given month, we got 5 appointments instead of like the 6 or 7 that we want, but we got 30 people to opt into marketing. Those are 30 seeds. And we know the sales cycle is long. So you need to know what you're tracking. You need to celebrate it, because my clients need to understand the value that we are bringing. And on the flip side, for MSPs, when you guys are having good QBRs and you're having big impact on the clients, you're allowing your client to reduce headcount by 1, suddenly their whole managed services contract is covered because you help them improve their productivity.
Right.
You need to document that, and you need to celebrate that so that when you get into the closing process with the other manufacturer, you're selling a story in that sales process that is meaningful.
I think every organization bigger than one or two people, and I know there are some one-man MSPs out there. If you want to have a Teams channel with yourself to go celebrate your wins, that's great. But I think a Microsoft Teams channel is a great place to do that, to give your salesperson a place to go ring the gong, right? We think about, the days of what was the Wall Street movie? Oh man, that's going to bother me. From the 1980s.
I was going to say Wolf of Wall Street, but I don't know.
No, before that. Anyway, it's the movie with the quote from "In every conversation, a sale is made. It's whether you convince them that they need the product or whether they convince you they don't." Boiler Room. There you go. Boiler Room. In Boiler Room, they were ringing bells when people are winning deals and those kind of things. Every organization needs to ring the gong when they win a sale, because there's always a divide between service delivery and sales. Sales promises too much. Service delivery doesn't deliver enough. Those slimy sales guys never work. All they do is golf, and the service delivery team works too hard. There's always this back and forth between them. And at some point, sales is the spoon that feeds the service delivery team and keeps everybody employed. And it's good to get everybody together to celebrate those wins. So I totally agree with that. So with that, I think we're at a good point to take a couple questions if folks have them. And while that's going on, we'll flip up a couple slides here if you'd like to connect with either Derek or I. I've snagged both of our LinkedIn links. You can grab us on LinkedIn or shoot us an email. So there's a couple slides here about who we are. We do have a question up here, an anonymous. How do you help sales reps who forecast every lead as worth chasing and going to close next week or next month perpetually? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Derek, because I have a lot of them.
Yeah, so we know that it takes, like, for us, somewhere between, it averages around 11, 12 touches per company for the SDR until we kind of get an appointment or we get a yes or a no. So we have some metrics that maybe will help through our tracking ability. So if we see that a lingering lead had way over so many touches, and the last couple of attempts, we're well done, and we can see the email that was sent, or we can hear the call that was made, and you connected with the right person, then you gotta get them out of your pipeline. And the reason is, I guess you gotta know if that pipeline keeps looking exaggerated because the SDR is keeping companies in his working pipeline to look like he's busy, he's hurting him or herself. You need to get these companies out, because it's to their advantage to get them out, to get a new potential prospect in. So
get to know early, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than being dragged along forever on a perpetual deal. You need to get your no early, and you need to move on. And this is where salespeople need a manager, because it's hard as a salesperson to let go, right? We want to see the value in that deal. We want to believe we can close them all, because good sales guys, they're a little arrogant. We may be a little arrogant. We have a lot of pride in our ability to go in and make that deal happen. There's just that one more stumbling block, and as soon as we get over that, they'll do business with me, right? It's hard. And sometimes the best thing a salesperson can do is go to a qualified lead and say, seems like you're not serious. Maybe you're not ready. Should we pick up this conversation again in 6 months? And it's amazing how fast people will trip over themselves to go, no, oh my God. And pick a deal back up. So I think there's ways to do that. I think you have to decide whether the deal is winnable or not. And sometimes the way to do that is just to force the salesman to reach out to that person and say, seems like you're just not ready. I've caught you at a bad time. Does it make sense for us to follow up in insert time frame here? If they're serious about you, they will correct you.
Yeah.
It's because they don't want to be told they're not good enough for you, or they're not ready for you, or whatever. It's almost an insult, but not really. You're really apologizing for catching them at a bad time, or when they weren't ready, or when they weren't. So the phrasing matters, the verbiage matters, practicing that matters, but it's a great technique in my mind for getting that customer to at least confirm to you that they're serious.
Yeah. And you're talking about already, like, you're already at a further stage in the process. Like I'm talking, like, on my side, where we see typically where things go wrong, or where it's like, this is why you're keeping them in your pipeline, is because we didn't actually talk to the right person in the company. So you might get blown off on a cold call, but you weren't even talking to the right person.
Got blown off by a gatekeeper. Yeah.
or you were blown off, but you didn't even get a chance to actually ask a question, so that you didn't even get an opportunity. So there are like, you got to kind of like peel the onion to really see like their why as to why they're keeping that opportunity or that lead in there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get to the bottom of that sometimes, but I also believe that there should be, I don't know what you do with your SDRs, but with an actual closer, I'm going to sit down with them every week and discuss their funnel. And when they bring me the same lead 2-3 weeks in a row and go, it's closing next week, it's closing next week, it's closing next week. At some point as the manager, I just have to look them in the eye and go, bullshit.
Yeah.
Right. You haven't been able to close it to now. You haven't been able to close it until now. What's going to change?
Yeah.
Go fire the lead. Go spend your time on something different. And that's where we get into those multiple roles, and we get into there being a lot of pieces to this puzzle. And it's so much harder when, as the owner, you have to wear all the hats. As you start to get different layers to this, it's nice to have an accountability partner to call you on some of your BS, because what this anonymous individual is doing is something that is very easy to do as a salesperson. So I've thrown Derek's slide up here as well. So for any of you who want Derek's email address and LinkedIn contact, go ahead and grab those. You'll be able to reach out to Derek and have some further conversations. At the very least, follow him on LinkedIn. He puts up a lot of really good content. So come connect with us all on LinkedIn. Look forward to it. Derek, is there anything you would like to say in closing? Because we're at 3:01 and we've held everybody over.
I got to go pick up my 2 boys. I got to go drive. They're 15 minutes away.
Making time for family. That's what matters. That's why we work for ourselves, right?
So, thank you guys very much for chiming in, and hope to connect with you.
Thanks everybody for coming out.
Bye guys.
Take care.
Bye Marty. Take care.